when I started making hot sauces, it was really just like this was the original one that we made. I'm so glad we have them out here as props. But we the habanero sauce that we make was the first one that I ever made, and that's all we did like as a company for like 2.5 years before we came out with anything else. But that it took me like a year and a half, 2 years to come up with the recipe for that, just through kind of experimentation and not being afraid to fail. Like anytime you fail at some creative endeavor, which I would argue is almost every endeavor, but every time you fail at a creative endeavor, it just kind of gives you more information. You just have more information about like, well, if I mix tangerines and I don't know, pork rinds together and
something tells me you've done that.
Yeah, it doesn't come out. I mean, it doesn't come out very good, but there's like you can say, okay, well, I mixed habaneros and manzano peppers and bell peppers and put a little bit of salt and sugar in it, and it tasted awful, but there was one redeeming quality about it, and you take that one redeeming thing and you save it, and then you mark everything else off, and you have more information. So I think that's what you do with music and with acting and anything that people, I mean, you can do that with anything. And, I mean, you can do that with podcasting. Like if you go back and look at a podcast and say, these are the things I liked about it. And, I want to do more of that and less of other stuff. Like I remember when I was training as a musician, they would call it, wood shedding. So it was like and when you're practicing, you're wood shedding. And so it's like getting all the wrong stuff out of your brain and out of your fingers so that you're playing the right stuff. And it's just like with anything, it's just wood shedding. You're just, you're not failing. You just have to practice enough times before you kind of hit the right notes, I guess.
When you first had your habanero, was that? Yeah. When you first had your habanero, how did you get it out to people at first? How are you, when you first discovered it, was it just like giving it to friends? Were you peddling it to restaurants? How did you get it out to the world?
Well, when I first kind of like came up with the recipe, I had been like handing it out to friends, like because I was trying to nail the recipe. So I was like, hey, try this. I feel like it needs more salt or like it needs some other note to it or something. So I'd give it out just to people to try it. To get feedback about it. And when I finally nailed the recipe, people were like, oh, this is really good. And my kind of funny story about that is that I was playing in bars and stuff, and I was trying to say, I've spent my life savings at several different points making music albums. And I'd be trying to sell albums, my albums and stuff at these bars, and people would come in and be like, hey, like I've heard about you make that hot sauce though, right? And I don't really want to buy an album, but I'll give you a couple of bucks for if you got some of that hot sauce. I heard about it. So I was playing at Pete's Piano Bar, and a friend of mine, Seth, opened a corn dog stand. So
no way. That sounds like the perfect avenue.
Yeah, he was selling corn dogs. He's selling corn dogs like right outside of the piano bar. And so it was really easy for me to be playing there, and I would like, and he was like, yeah, this is really good. Like make me a couple of bottles and I'll, put it on my like spicy hot dog or corn dogs. And, so he did that. And I remember
did his sales go up?
Well, I mean, his sales were probably fine. Either way, it's, but I remember he sent me a picture one time of like, the lead singer from Counting Crows had gotten a like spicy hot dog and really liked the sauce or something. He sent me a picture of it, and I thought that was cool. But that was sort of how we got the initial validation, sort of the initial market validation. It was just, making a bunch of bottles of it and giving it away a lot of times, or just like, I didn't know for a long time how to figure out my cost on something, on like a bottle. So I was like, I didn't know for sadly a couple of years how to like calculate my exact cost to make a bottle of sauce. I just didn't think about it. I just liked the fact that people wanted to buy the sauce, and we kind of went from there to like, I had enough people that really liked the sauce that I was just putting it in those little, like ketchup and mustard bottle. You can just buy the little like clear, not the ones that are red and yellow, but like just the clear like ketchup mustard bottles you can buy at the store. And I would just put it in those bottles. And my girlfriend, who's also my business partner, Erin designed all the labels, because we were kind of like, hey, people really like this. It'd be cool to do some farmers markets or to try and sell it to a couple of local restaurants. So that's how we kind of accident. It was not intended to be a business. It was just sort of like we had this project. We, got some validation from people being like, oh, I really like this. I want this at my corn dog stand, or, let me buy a bottle of it from you at the bar or something. And so I'd have to like go to the bar with a backpack full of hot sauce instead of
hot sauce.
Yeah, right. So I sold a lot of hot sauce out of my backpack. I sold a lot of hot sauce out of like the back of my car in parking lots and stuff for a couple of years. It was
so gangster.
Yeah, it was pretty gangster. Yeah. But I didn't really put the pieces together about how to make it a business for a while, and it was just kind of was one piece at a time. But like Erin and I thought it would be just a fun project to do, like because she's a graphic designer, and when we first moved here, she was doing freelance graphic design, which I feel like the state of freelance graphic design, at least in 2012, 2013, kind of was. It was sort of like the Wild West, especially out here where you've got a bunch of graphic designers, and there's a lot of companies who don't value good design the way that they probably should, and they're just kind of going for the lowest, whoever's the cheapest. So it was, she had a hard time with that, but this was like a fun project that we could do together. That was not, like she didn't have to have a graphic design client who, I was just like, do whatever you want. Like, I had some ideas, she had some ideas about the branding and the packaging, and we just did it, and we started taking it to.
What a great collab!
Yeah,
or like
fun.
What a great marriage of like ideas of like, I have this thing, you have this thing. Like, let's go for it.
So we decided early on, like I was just going to be responsible for stuff that was inside the bottle, and she was responsible for stuff that's outside the bottle. And
that's awesome.
That was like the simple way to break it down. And people would be like, what is your job title? Oh, I'm the inside the bottle guy. The outside the bottle, girl. That's how we started. Was we just kind of figured out that people liked it, and then we put a name on it and a face on a brand on it, and Erin developed a website around it. So we kind of initially launched with like farmers markets, and kind of like we got some permits to got to get the permits to like make it and go rent some time at a commercial kitchen. And
so that's how that works. So when you're doing it at scale, and by at scale I mean like it's not just for a couple friends. It's like you have to make a whole bunch. You go to a commercial kitchen and you rent the space to cook the stuff.
But you also have to be, if I was just like, selling it to my friends for like a couple of bucks, that's okay. But like if you're going to go to do a farmer's market, or you want to sell it to a restaurant or a store or something, you have to be making it in a kitchen that's inspected by the health department. So like it doesn't have to be a kitchen that you own, but like you can go rent time at a commissary kitchen or something. And you have to like come in and be like, here's my, inspection report, and here's my manufacturer's license. And there's a handful of things that you have to have just to like go to your first farmer's market.
That sounds like it was probably a lot of fun for you to go through all of that just to get to a farmer's market.
It was not that bad. I actually enjoyed, it was really cool to me to learn about the process of, getting, food, like a food item on a shelf, because I feel like for a long time, like going to a grocery store, it just seems like magic that stuff is there, that some company came up with the recipe and packaging, and lab tests everything and built the facility and distributes it and whatever. Like it seems like magic. And so like figuring out all those little steps along the way, I thought was kind of neat. Like getting the permits and
about the journey, not the final destination.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there really is not a final destination. It's just to kind of keep doing the next the next thing. I mean, there's no point at which you're like, all right, I'm done. I mean, like,
I did that.
Yeah, did it, unless you're trying to like sell your company or do something major like that. But like, if you look at some of like, the legacy brands and stuff, like, like Heinz ketchup or something, like Tabasco. So, I'm just thinking of stuff that's in my sort of like little corner of
your niche,
my little like corner of the grocery store. Like Tabasco is still trying to figure stuff out. They've been around for 200 years or whatever, and they're still trying to like figure out, how to make a better product, or how to, they're still trying to figure stuff out. They haven't like hit the, like, okay, we're here. I'm sure for a while, like Tabasco was like the only game in town, and they were like, they probably had, a number of decades where they were like, we're here, we're just doing the thing that we're doing. But
also in your beginning days, did you ever have, what was your worst like concoction that you ever made?
Oh God, I made so many bad ones. There are two that I can like really tell a story of how bad they were.
Please do tell.
So like when I first started, when I was first like sampling stuff out to people, because I would go around town and like go to different restaurants and chefs and be like, here's a bottle of it, just try it. I'd love to know what you think about it. Before I was trying to like sell them stuff. And there's a spot. Do you know Whip In?
Yeah.
So
they got that nice. I was about to describe the sign, but yes.
Yeah. So there's a
Speaking of branding.
Yeah, there's a place in Austin called Whip In, and it's they do sort of like fast casual-ish Indian food, and they have a bunch of beers on tap and a bunch of local products and like they have a wine bar now. And sometimes their espresso machine works. So sometimes they also
that about a place.
Yeah.
It's like, did you get espresso? It wasn't espresso type of day.
Not today. No, not this week. But so I had brought some stuff. So I was fermenting, like originally I was like fermenting peppers and stuff. And I was experimenting with like wild fermentation was sort of the first iteration of that. And then I was experimenting with like fermenting peppers with different sorts of yeasts that were not usually used in like a pepper sauce or something. So I made a batch that I fermented with champagne yeast, and you probably see where it's going, but so I made this batch that I fermented with champagne yeast, but then you're supposed to cook it. There's a step where you like cook it to kill the yeast, so it stops
fermenting.
And so I did that, but I think that this particular yeast was just really robust. I mean, I cooked it like at twice the temperature of what yeast is supposed to be able to live through. I think 110 is like where yeast, 110 degrees, like where yeast starts dying, like if you're making bread or beer or something like that. And I put it in these bottles, similar to these bottles, like a little bit bigger bottle than this. And I put it in these bottles, and I'd taken a sample to Quickie Picky, and they called me back and were like, to their credit, not furious about it. They were like, is this some kind of joke? Like apparently they had opened the bottle and it just erupted like up to the ceiling. Like their head chef had like opened it.
He didn't have to go to the hospital.
Nobody went to the hospital. Nobody went to the hospital. But it like erupted and like hit the ceiling. Like she just barely like dodged it and stuff. And I tried it. Like I ended up the rest of that batch. I opened them in the backyard, and it was like they shot across the yard. It was not. I mean, it was like champagne.
What an epic failure!
It was an epic failure. The other like big like failure that I could look at that I had a bunch of feedback on was in 2011 maybe, and this was when I was still trying to figure out. It was 2011 or 2012. I was still sort of like in the midst of making the recipe.
For your habanero?
Yeah, and I had entered, I think it was 2012, I had entered the Austin Hot Sauce Festival, and I was like, I'm going to bring this recipe, the current recipe that I've got. I mean, it's just, I didn't have like table or anything. You can enter it in the contest, and they have like, for people who've never been to this or any other hot sauce festival, they have like a tasting tent where there's like, they have all these tables lined up, and they basically like take the hot sauces and they just number them, and then and they like put it into like they pour them all into the same sort of jar, and then people like taste it with chips, and then they can vote on like their favorite number. And so like I submitted mine, and then I was like, okay, I know what it tastes like. I know what it looks like. I went through the tasting tent and I found the one that was mine. It was like number 43 or something. And so I just like camped out kind of a little ways away, and I was watching people as they tried my sauce, and there were like more people than I care to count who spit it out or made like a, like just a shudder of disgust, like, and I
what
was
great
like,
feedback though.
Yeah, it was great feedback. And I feel like there's a lot of, companies who just release stuff out into the world without getting, it wasn't like a market research group. I didn't have to pay for it. I mean, I did have to pay like $50 or something to enter the sauce, but then it was basically like a market research group of all, ages, sexes, and whatever.
And nobody knows you're there looking at them.
Nobody knows I'm there looking at them, and they all hated it. So I was like,
Jesus.
it was bad. I mean, it was bad.
That's so cool that you can take an experience like that, but still go and continue and be like, all right, what did I learn from this? That's awesome.
I learned that it was bad, not to do it again.
So word out on the agricultural, that's a term. That's a word.
Sure,
streets is you maintain a high integrity and quality of your product. And one way of doing that is sourcing through regenerative farming. Do you not?
We do. Yeah, we do as much as we can. And one of the issues there is that a lot of, organic and biodynamic stuff, there's not a lot of,
could you give because like when I first heard you talk about it, I was like, I didn't know what it was. Can you explain the differences between those?
So conventional farming would be like I don't know, conventional is a bit of a misleading term, but like conventional farming is like the big sort of like factory farms where they spray kind of any pesticide that they want on it, any sort of like herbicides or like any sort of thing that they want, they can spray out there. They can crop dust the fields, whatever they want to do. And that's certainly the easiest and cheapest way to do farming, just because you have a lot of problems with pests and stuff. Stuff will want to eat, your food that you're growing, because it's food. Yeah. And so you put out stuff that kills that stuff that wants to eat it. So that's conventional farming. And then the big problem with that is that you get a lot of that. You get residues from those pesticides and herbicides and stuff on the food that it's been sprayed with since it was a seed. Organic farming is certainly a step up from that. So I guess you would have conventional, and then non-GMO would be sort of the next level. And that's basically, it doesn't have to be organic. So stuff that's non-GMO is like a step up from conventional, because they're certifying that they haven't used, genetically modified stuff. There's still a lot of like pesticides that they can spray on it. It's mostly like, have they genetically modified the seeds for, so like if you get non-GMO corn and it's not organic, they can still use a lot of pesticides and herbicides on the corn, as long as they haven't genetically modified that seed. And then you kind of take another step up, is organic, which means that the list of stuff that they can put on it becomes a lot more restrictive. So organic, hopefully will become the new sort of like baseline standard. And that's what we're working towards, as well as that would be the baseline. Organic today is not the same as organic was 60 or 70 years ago, because they have expanded that list of what you can use, what you can spray on organic crops. And there have been companies that have developed, weed killers or whatever, that sort of like that sort of like toe the line and they get the organic certification. But organic is a really good baseline to go from, because there's a lot of stuff that they can't use. And I think a thing that a lot of people don't realize is that for something to be organic, it has to be non-GMO.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you see something and it says organic but doesn't say non-GMO,
it's already
non-GMO, right?
I love how there's a step ladder of how clean your product can be.
Yeah, right. And then there's sort of like at the top right now is and this is really not caught on in a large scale way, but biodynamic is sort of like another step or two above organic. And biodynamic is very like, you can't use any chemicals at all, and it's really like I've been to a handful of biodynamic farms trying to find out if we could source stuff from them, and we currently don't use any biodynamic ingredients, because like biodynamic is really, and it's in the name, but it's kind of like this circular method of farming where you have trees, you have fruit trees, and you have perennial crops and annual crops, and you do sort of like, you don't use pesticides, but you grow, it's sort of this idea that you can grow two types of plants together. So like we have we grow a bunch of stuff at home, so we try to make our backyard kind of a food garden as well. And we've had a couple of years where we went overboard, but we grew, like you can grow like if you want to grow like peppers, there's a lot of pests that'll get at peppers, but you can kind of line your pepper garden with garlic. You can grow garlic around the outside, and it'll deter a lot of those pests. So that's the idea of biodynamic, is it's completely organic. There's nothing that you're spraying. There's no genetically modified anything. And it's also, you have to have in order for something to be certified biodynamic, they have to have livestock in there that are providing, manure to like fertilize the plants, and that the soil is naturally balanced with, compost that you are making on site from, stuff that you've grown, and that you're turning the fields in a certain way, and you've got, different crops that regenerate the soil in between time. So it's really, biodynamic is really interesting, but it's not, you can't really do it at a large scale because of the way, like if you look at these big monoculture farms, it's just 200 acres of soybeans or whatever. So they can have these big giant machines that will, go and till the fields like 10 or 20 rows at a time, or that will go just cut down the bean stalks and, harvest everything in an automated way. And you can't do that with biodynamic farming, because you're not making row crops. You're kind of planting everything together. So sorry if that's like a long-winded explanation, but it's really like it's really something that's right now is very like local and small batch kind of.
Yeah, it sounds like you're creating your own natural habitat to fight nature's things with nature at the top of the scale. So at that top tier one that you're talking about, is that the regenerative farming, where it's just like it's just its own ecosystem that keeps doing something?
But I mean, you can do organic, can be regenerative as well.
Okay.
So like there's and a lot of that has to do with how you treat the soil. There's a lot of, like, if you just are doing monoculture all the time, so you can have a giant 200 or 2,000 acre organic like monoculture. Monoculture just means they're growing one crop. They're always growing corn, or they're always growing potatoes or whatever. And so whatever nutrients that potatoes need, they'll just strip the soil of that stuff. So if you're not turning that land, then you're not really regenerating it. So a lot of times you can just put you can grow a crop year after year by just spraying fertilizer, on the fields, but you're not necessarily regenerating. The land by doing that.
I gotcha.
So, A lot of it is like, what is your cover crop plan? So like in the winter you grow something, and like every year maybe I'm growing potatoes and they take a lot of potassium or whatever out of the soil. I'm just making this up. I don't know. But like maybe they take a lot of potassium out of the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to regenerate that, next year I'm going to grow fava beans, which put a lot of potassium back into the soil and take a lot of nitrogen or something. They take a lot more nitrogen than potatoes. So you would sort of rotate stuff so that your soil stays balanced. And
yeah, most of the people that you source from are doing the regenerative stuff.
And we're trying to build our build our book of people that we can source from, because a lot of people who are doing regenerative stuff are doing a much smaller model, or they sell at farmers markets or whatever. So yeah, we're like working towards working with farmers that are doing more regenerative stuff.
So when you got to coming from farmers markets and everything, I think one of the coolest things is that your product now is inside all of the big places. It's inside like the H-E-Bs, it's inside the Whole Foods and the Walmarts and everything. One of the things that I thought was really cool was when I was watching a show, Billions, on Showtime.
Yeah.
Could you just tell a story of how they mentioned your product on the show?
Yeah. So the guy who writes and produces the show, Brian Koppelman, who's done like the Oceans movies, and he's done a bunch of cool stuff. But I guess at some point he had sent us a message on Twitter. I think he's really active on Twitter. He had sent us a message on Twitter that like, hey, I really love your stuff, out here. And we're like, is that the Brian Koppelman? He's like, yeah, I really love your stuff. And I think we were just like, hey, well, we'll send you a box of hot, like, give us your, y'all's address out there. We'll send you a box of hot sauce. And so he sent us the address to like the writer's room for the show Billions.
It's so crazy how that works.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's so crazy how that works.
And so we just sent them some stuff. We didn't ask him for anything. We just said, here you go. Like that, like really appreciate you loving our stuff. And so we would do that every once in a while for, a year and a half. And then he had, at one point had like sent us a message that was like, and we didn't really make a big deal about it. We weren't ever like, Brian Koppelman loves our stuff. We're not name dropping about it. I guess I'm name dropping now on the podcast.
I'm giving you the opportunity.
Thanks. So anyway, Brian Koppelman sort of loves our stuff. Anyway, like but yeah, we just would, we send stuff to their writer's room every once in a while, and he had sent us a message, and he was like talking to Aaron, because I am not very good at social media, so I don't. It's not something that I.
Outside the bottle.
Yeah. She's outside the bottle. She was like, oh, Brian Koppelman had, sent us this, like a release form. He said he wants to put our stuff in the show at some point. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And like in my mind, it was going to be just in the background on like a table or something.
Like just some extra. But
just some, yeah. Maybe not even something, just as a set dressing, because from doing a little bit of acting years ago, and kind of like I lived in LA for a while and did some like stuff where I was an extra, and like the set dressing is just a big part of that, and a lot of studios will like go get money from, if they're going to have a cafe setting, they'll go get money from each of those brands that they put out. If they're going to have Heinz on the table at a cafe, like a lot of times Heinz will pay them, $50,000 to put it out there instead of, I don't know what other ketchup.
Tangent. The one place or show that I think does a great job with it is Big Bang Theory. Like instead of Dr. Pepper, they have like the Pepper Doc, but the brand, the thing looks like exactly the same on the can. But continue. Yeah.
But so that's a big deal if you haven't like gotten a form if you haven't like signed off with a brand or something.
If it shows up.
They have to turn they'll have to turn the beer bottle around. Like it's one of those things that's like fun to notice if you're watching a show or a movie or something like that. Usually like a lot of them
All of the shirts don't have any logos.
no logos.
Yeah.
And if they're drinking a beer or something, they'll have it turned, the back label turned towards the camera. So you don't see Bud Light, or you don't see whatever the brand of beer is. That means that they haven't paid, a beer company hasn't paid to have their name. It would have cost, even though they're drinking a Bud Light, it would have cost Budweiser, $100,000 for them to turn that label around. But anyway, that's sort of a tangent, but
we have Yellowbird right here on camera.
Yeah, right. And your check's in the mail. So he had sent us like a release form, like we want to put it in the show and whatever. And I was like, okay, it's just going to be in the background as a set dressing. And then they had this whole, we saw the episode that it was on, and they had like a whole scene about it. Like,
it was crazy. It was so cool.
Yeah, they could like go to the store, and they're talking about like, yeah, I want like a real hot sauce. Like what's something that's really good? And they like pull, like they get Yellowbird off the shelf, and they like it's like a commercial. They're like, oh yeah, Yellowbird hot sauce.
Yeah. For those of you that are just listening, he's just holding it. Like, imagine like just like a little twinkle coming from his teeth. Like, ding, Yellowbird.
Well, it happened. There was a twinkle. If you're watching, you know that there was. You can tell everybody.
Yeah. I think before it, they were having a discussion of like, I don't want that. I want the nah, and then they're like, no, Yellowbird.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was cool. It was pretty cool.
Did you have any other social things like that happen?
We've had a handful of like things where we got mentions that we didn't really ask for, that kind of, gave us a sales bump. I think the thing that gave us sort of the biggest like bump in like recognition, like people caring about our stuff, was Jesse James, like the West Coast Choppers, Sandra Bullock, Jesse James. He has a motorcycle shop in Austin, and I think he's actually moved back here now from when he was doing West Coast Choppers. But he had same thing. He had like reached out to us on social media or something and been like, "Hey, I love your sauce," and I, me and my daughters like put it on everything, and we all have different favorites. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man! Like, let me know what y'all's favorites are. I'll like make you up a little gift box or something." And so I just sent. He told me like, "Well, my daughters like this one. I like this one." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And I made him a little gift box and sent it to him. And then he like, when he got it, he like posted it on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook or something.
Something where lots of eyeballs get on it.
That was the biggest single biggest sales bump that we've ever gotten, because his fans are like super fans of him, and it's like whatever he was like had a picture of the box, and he was like, "Love this Yellowbird sauce." And it was something really simple, like, "I really love Yellowbird sauce. It's really great, Texas made hot sauce." And like we sold a lot of hot sauce that month. I mean, those sort of things, those like mentions sort of, they trail off, but like,
yeah,
it's
I think it brings some clout to the brand, though, at least in the long tail end. I love a question like that, because it's just, I'm fascinated, obviously, with my realm, working with the tribe and everything, is like in the social media and everything. It's like, I love the leveraging of social media, and it's just crazy to me in today's day and age. If you're passionate about anything, and then you're really gung-ho about it, and other people catch on to that, it's like, oh, hey, this person digs this one thing, I dig this too, because of, say, it's a story behind it or something like that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's on a TV show, or it's posted on social media from another person that does a TV show or something like that. It's so crazy.
I think that's cool. The thing that I don't like about that whole system is how much you can pay for that stuff.
Yeah.
Because like, if I like, it's cool that we got on this Billions show because they liked our stuff. But then there's a lot of other products who are on TV shows or get mentioned in somebody's social media just because they paid for it, and not because it's a good product, but because they've spent. I could rail on food marketing for like a long time, but it's kind
I
of
feel like I've opened a can of worms.
No, I don't. I'm not gonna go off on it, but I do think just in general, like it's hard to know what stuff is organic, not like organic farmed, but what stuff happens organically and what stuff is like paid for, like if that.
Oh, you mean organically as in like the relationship, or just
right?
them
Like
actually loving your brand?
Because there's a lot of like social media influencers that the way that they make their living is that they go, and we've had a lot of them reach out to us like, hey, like I have 2 million followers and I will mention you in a post or like tag you in a post for $10,000, and we're like, we don't have that kind of money. So they're going to go call some other brand, some other hot sauce brand or any sort of brand. And then those people that see that mention or whatever may or may not realize, and I think they've changed the rules. You have to mention that it's sponsored.
It's an ad.
Yeah.
Hashtag.
But not everybody who sees that is going to realize that. They're just going to be like, oh, somebody that I follow is repping this stuff. I should try it out. And they don't realize that it's that's been bought,
Yeah, exactly. It's business, I guess.
Yeah, business is crazy.
Business in the internet age. Let's go ahead and start to wrap it up. If you were to talk to anybody that was getting into the slinging of sauces or just anything entrepreneurial like this, what kind of information would you give them?
I think the thing that I like to tell people is to get some validation for what you're doing before you
put it in a hot sauce contest and then look at people.
Yeah. Get some I think that's a great sort of like little parable for like get some validation, because let's say that I were a big company. There's a lot of big companies who will put stuff out, or medium-sized companies who will put stuff out and not get validation, not get the right sorts of validation on it. Like they might say, oh, well, kombucha is really, like there's a lot of, like in food, there's just so much crossover stuff. It's like kombucha is really cool and people really love pickles, so we're going to make kombucha pickles or something like that. Just because both of those things do really good sales right now, let's put them together and release it. And then all of a sudden you've put all this money into releasing kombucha pickles, and this is a hypothetical. Sorry, if there's maybe there's a really successful kombucha pickle brand out there, but the idea that like try that out, like give it to your friends, and then like expand the circle outside of that. Like if everybody loves it at this level, and then everybody loves it at this level, and then take it to this level. So I think that getting some validation for what you're doing is good. And I really like the idea of not just putting stuff out just to put stuff out. Just I think that one of the things that we talk about a lot is, and people ask us, our retailers or people that we work with, our fans and stuff, our customers will ask us like, hey, I'd really love a Yellowbird ... Like what if there was a Yellowbird salsa, or what about a
barbecue sauce?
What about a barbecue sauce, or like
or
a spicy mayonnaise, or whatever? And
Chipotle mayo.
It's like if you look out in the marketplace, it's like, well, if I'm going to make a spicy mayonnaise, like there's already mayonnaise, there's Yellowbird sauce, just mix them together. Like I'm not necessarily going to make mayonnaise better than somebody making mayonnaise. And that adds complexity to because we do all our own manufacturing. So like if I'm going to make mayonnaise, I want to make the best mayonnaise, like I don't want to make mayonnaise that's just equivalent to something in the marketplace, because then you're just putting more stuff out there, like I don't think there need to be, 50 different kinds of mayonnaise. There just needs to be a couple that are really good or really different. Like a really good whole fat mayo or really good vegan mayo, like just have a handful. And so when we put this stuff out, it was really, I think that, like the hot sauce market is changing a lot, but I'm kind of going on a tangent for as far as like what advice I would give people. I think
I think it all relates to each other.
But would be to get some validation for what you're doing, and like make sure that you're not just copying something. Like, don't make another Facebook. We've already got Facebook, unless it's like substantially different. you've changed some major things. Like people, maybe you're making a Facebook, but you don't collect any data or sell any ads. Like I would sign up for that Facebook, but nobody's making it. Do some validation, make a differentiated product, and do something that you would want.
That you're passionate about.
Yeah, something.
In progress.
Yeah, but like do something that I mean, like for this thing, I made something that I wanted there to be in the world, and I think a lot of things, a lot of like businesses that have become these huge great businesses are because somebody was like, man, I wish there was some sort of a network that would connect college people. Like I wish it was out there. I'm just gonna make it. I think I can make it. And I'm not trying to compare Yellowbird to Facebook. I'm just saying that that's sort of like like making something that you want to see in the marketplace, and not just something that I did some research and I think that this would be a good thing, because then you're not going to be as motivated and passionate about it. And then I guess one of the most important things with any business is don't run out of money. Like, it's like a thing that I don't think gets said enough.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about entrepreneurship and starting your own business and something, and you talk about the drama and the passion of it and the adventure of it, but also like don't run out of money, because it doesn't matter. It's not going to matter how great of a thing you made if you don't manage your money. And that was something that that I almost majorly screwed up a couple of times, because I did not, I came from the creativity, passion side.
You were romantic about it.
Sure, yeah. And I had to learn some business and money management lessons like the hard way, and we almost went under a couple of times, and kind of barely pulled out of it. And it's like if we had, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Nobody would care about Yellowbird because it wouldn't be a thing. It'd be some other company who was like, oh, remember that company Yellowbird? Like, let's rip off what they were doing, and that's who you'd be talking about. So
kind of a glum way of thinking about it.
It's a glum, but I mean, it's like,
it's definitely fuel for the fire to like continue on.
Yeah. I think if you have people who are like listening to your podcast, you're like, I have a thing that I want to do. I want to quit my day job. I want to work for myself. Like, you got to manage your money, or otherwise you're going to be, you're going to be, refinancing your house, or, you're going to be back at that day job, or maybe at a worse job. So yeah, just try not to run out of money.
I guess with that, be practical in the steps that you take to pursue your business.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. I think that's a management of risk.
Some of it is. I mean, and you do, like, I certainly have like bet the farm on a hot sauce company. I put everything into it, so I risked a lot. Like it could have, at any point ruined me for a long time, because I risked a lot. But I do think that there is. I don't want to say don't take a risk, because if you don't take a risk, then that means don't start your own business. There's risk inherent to it, but just realize that it's not just about being artistic and going to parties and saying you're an entrepreneur and you own your own business, but that
you have to actually create something.
You have to create something that's valuable, and you have to make sure you know how to sustain it, or learn how to sustain it. That's what I had to do. I had to go to business classes like after I was already running a business. We didn't really get, so we started this as a business in 2013, and I didn't really figure out how to manage it as business till 2015, which is terrifying,
But I think there's something to be said that you were actually doing. Whereas if it wasn't just an idea in your head, and it's like, oh, well, I guess I'll go to those business classes, and then maybe I'll start the
I think doing something is great. And there's a bunch of books that have been written about it, and like Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Work Week, and things like that, where it's like, hey, you can still have a full-time job and start kind of like developing this thing that you want to, I guess the final piece of advice among my like 20 pieces of advice I've already given. Or like,
I'm just keep continuing the conversation.
Just keep continuing. But like to do something, you know, and I think that it's an easy thing to say and not as easy to do. Mm-hmm. But like, if you want to do, you know, if you want to do a podcast, like do it, mm-hmm. you know, like you don't have to be perfect on your first try. And I think that's something that is, I think that's one of my traits that works as an entrepreneur is realizing that you don't have to be perfect on your first try, and
you're gonna have bottles exploding. On chefs that do you know if they use Yellowbird there? No,
they do. Yeah, they do. Well, that chef is not there anymore. She left and went somewhere else mm-hmm. shortly thereafter. But you ended up buying Yellowbird sauce at another place that she went, because I went back and I was like, you know, I'm so sorry, I was experimenting. And she, as a chef, like she was like, I appreciate that. I appreciate mm-hmm. that you were, you know, that you're like trying to make it better and whatever. You know, I was like, I did have to do some convincing that I wasn't. They thought it was somebody like purposely trying to fuck them or like hurt them or something. Yeah. I was like, no, I wasn't. I was experimenting, and I hadn't had it do that yet, because I guess it had, you know, it was bottled, and I had one that was not mm-hmm. closed up, so I didn't realize that the yeast was still active or whatever.
Yeah. So, but if that wouldn't have happened, you wouldn't have learned from it.
Yeah.
And it's better to learn it then than to have a whole vat full of Yellowbird sauce that may have exploded.
Yeah.
And done all that stuff. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a great experience.
Yeah, thank you.
Where can they find you?
Like online or?
Online. You mentioned that hot sauce festival, which you guys will be back at, won't you?
We'll be back at, yeah. It's, I think the third Sunday in August. Mm-hmm. I have to double check the date. I want to say it's maybe like the 25th or the 27th.
What was the name of the festival?
It's the Austin Chronicle Hot Sauce Festival.
There you go.
So, yeah.
But yeah, online. Where can they find the product and all that?
So you can find us online at yellowbirdsauce.com. All of our social media is at Yellowbird Sauce. So Facebook, you know, / Yellowbird Sauce, Twitter, Instagram at Yellowbird Sauce. You can email us, thebird@yellowbirdsauce.com.
That's awesome.
You
great branding.
Yeah, super great branding. It's all over the place. You can find us on
Aaron.
You can find us on, yeah, great job, Aaron. Well done. You can find us on Amazon. We're in Whole Foods and H-E-B, Central Market, Walmart. We got a store locator we're in like 1,800 something stores.
Mm-hmm. And I know I asked this in an email, but if there was something that, so if you maybe ask them via Twitter with hashtag Yellowbird Sauce, if there was something the customers that you would want to ask them, what would you want to ask them to give you some feedback?
Yeah, I would love I love hearing from people that like our stuff, that don't like it, that have, you know, any sort of like constructive criticism. I would love to know what people like and don't like about our stuff. We're not necessarily going to change it, but
yeah.
I also would really love to know what kinds of new products people would like to see from us, because we will develop some stuff that's within our mm-hmm. our specialization, and I'm really interested to know what people like.
Cool. This has been Passion in Progress with your boy Javier Mercedes. Thank you so much, George of Yellowbird Sauces. This has been a great experience, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review on iTunes. Adios.